Yeah, so the point of the presentation then, as it says, was to discuss the barriers to blockchain within the UK's construction industry. So I picked the UK's construction industry just because that's where I'm from. And in terms of how I collected the data, it made the most sense. I'm hoping everyone, even if they're not from the UK, can maybe get something from it, because a lot of the things that I identified within the study have also been identified globally. So from studies saying like Hong Kong and China, places like that too. Um, so just to give a bit of background, what was a really important study was done by the government themselves, called Constructing Excellence 2009. So that was basically a deep dive into the UK's construction industry to learn about why maybe it's not growing as quickly as other countries' construction industries, what's holding it back. So the main things to come up was, number one was that basically clients were just completely apathetic to the construction process. It's slow, it's quite hard. There's a good chance of it going to into sort of disputes in courts and things like that. There's a perception of contractors as opportunistic. A big one as well was that culture was directly tied to economic factors. This is something that came up again in the study I done as well. So we'll probably talk about that a bit more. And then it's also the fact that a lot of construction organisations just don't have the influence, they don't have the control or the will to kind of completely overhaul their supply chains into accepting new ways of working or a new digital tool like blockchain, for example. And then just on top of that as well, the few business drivers to improve. Quite a big thing was that because of the low profit margins in construction, most organisations don't have the capital to invest into research and development as well. So I know it's sounding a bit doom and gloom at the minute in terms of implementing blockchain, but just to drop a bit of a spoiler, every participant could see that there was a use for blockchain in the construction industry, in construction processes. Some were more certain than others, but most agreed that there's a place for it, especially within the context of construction 4.0 and things like that as well. So there's the research objectives there. It's just to identify the barriers to blockchain within the UK's construction industry. So just in terms of what studies have came before, there's really not a lot that are specific to the UK. So the main ones that I found were by Colleds and et al. 2024, but that was more focused on digital transformation. Just on that, they found that basically staffing issues, the lack of an effective digital strategy, and the fact that there's not a lot of IT training for people in the construction industry, big obstacles to digital transformation. Then there was a study by Professor Sullivan Badi and some other academics as well that was done in 2021. That was specific to blockchain within the UK's construction industry. So they found that just not a lot of people know about blockchain enough for it to be a conversation with stakeholders. They also found that was linked with, again, the fact that most people in the construction industry don't come from an IT background. I think Professor Lou was talking a bit about his experience and speaking about people in the industry with it. And and they struggle to understand something complex like blockchain. So that's another challenge as well. They also found that it's quite from the people that they interviewed perspectives, that it's hard to integrate with existing systems as well. And then there's also a conflation with cryptocurrency, as in that they're basically the same thing, which of course we know that's not true. Interestingly as well, the UK government actually produced a white paper in 2021, which was about the distributed ledger tech, and they were actually not the biggest fans of it, which was quite surprising. To be honest, if you read the white paper, it's quite damning in terms of they don't see basically any use for it. They see it could lead to a lot of costs financially, environmentally, and computationally as well. So, you know, if someone doesn't know a lot about blockchain and that's the first thing they read, that might put them off as well. But however, that has changed as we have went into 2024, because the UK now has a re-envisaged goal of becoming an international centre for things to do with crypto assets and things like that. So that is starting to change. So in terms of the study I performed then, it was in interviews with 7 participants, who we'll get into shortly, did being identified and approached over LinkedIn. So it was to do with one in terms of how senior they were, and then also was to do with would they know what blockchain is. And it was quite hard to find people who did know what blockchain was, to a strong enough degree that they felt comfortable participating in a piece of research like this, but we did find them. So just in terms of what I was speaking to them about, I was asking questions that were like, how do you feel about, what are your thoughts on, could you explain a bit more about, open-ended questions like that, so they could really give their own opinions. And the goal of the interviews wasn't to challenge them on things that they said. It was just to help them elaborate on their own thoughts. So you might read into something that I say that a participant said, and it might not make sense to you because it might be wrong or it might not be completely true. But again, that was their perception of it. And if we're going to study the barriers to blockchain, then I think it's important to understand their perceptions as well. So 7 participants, there was a good span in terms of how much they knew about blockchain. So participants A knew very little about blockchain. He had heard of it, but why I decided to include them in the study was just the fact that they are quite involved in the decision-making process within their organisation when it comes to bringing on new technology. So again, I think it's important that even though they might not be an expert on it, it's important that we can understand their view of things like blockchain. And then that went all the way up to participants F, who had completed their PhD on smart contracts within the construction industry, and participant G, who has completed a master's thesis around blockchain technology as well. So one of the things that I made sure to ask them was how they learned about new tech, because I think that that's really important for us to know if we're going to start to try and persuade people in the industry to take it up. So what we got from asking that question was that basically academic research is still very important. A lot of people do look to it to find out about something new. Social media as well is very important, and conversations between colleagues regarding new tech doesn't really happen. So I think it's important to note that just because a participant didn't mention a way of how they learned about new tech, that doesn't mean they didn't do it. But I think it says a lot that they didn't mention it. It didn't cross their mind. So I think that could be something straight away for us to take a gander at, in terms of, encouraging people to discuss about new things that they've learned with the colleagues. Only participants here had mentioned that explicitly. And then just before going into the barriers, these were the incentives that they could mention. It might tell us a bit more about how much each participant knew, although I would say participant F is the exception, even though they only mentioned two things. They did mention them in quite detail, in quite a lot of detail. And of course, they completed the PhD on blockchain as well. So data security, facilitating integration. So that was vertically between the sort of from director down to just normal employee, and then across supply chains as well. So going into the barriers then, the top barriers that were identified across the interviews was financial barriers were the most important, alongside just not enough people know about blockchain, or they don't have the expertise to the degree in terms of IT where they can begin to understand it. And then also just a general resistance to change within the construction industry. So we'll go a bit more into that as well. In terms of how the participants viewed the barriers, in terms of how they interrelated, participants A, for example, thought that the resistance to change attitude across the construction industry becomes exacerbated by financial concerns at the executive level, kind of board of directors. So, for example, they might have some financial concerns about bringing on something like blockchain. And then because of that, they become more entrenched to new tech in general. Participant B saw the resistance to change due to the need to consistently make profit in the construction industry, which is a tough environment to do so with the low margins. But there wasn't a lot of consensus on how they were interrelated. Every participant did say that they were. Participant D spoke about a lack of technical expertise, just makes helping people in the industry understand the benefits of blockchain a lot harder. And when it combines with a focus on quick financial wins, persuading people can be a massive challenge. Participants E, for example, viewed culture and financial barriers as quite separate, whereas participants F seen them as quite interrelated. So to go through the barriers kind of one by one. So what became apparent was there's a big link between how a construction company performs financially and how much it wants to innovate, especially in regards to digital tools. Participants C, E, and F all mention that explicitly without prompt. Participant G and participant B, I put that question to them just out of interest, and they also agreed with that as well. But to explore kind of what that means, then it's to do with low profit margins. So because companies don't have a lot of capital to invest into research and development, it makes it really hard to justify to stakeholders, to people who kind of hold the keys in regards to bringing on new tech. It makes it a lot harder to persuade them because it's such a big decision for them. And especially when it's something so complex like blockchain, I think that might explain a large part of why we've seen it on a portion of HS2 in the UK being used, but apart from that, I don't think I've found another application of it. So yeah, and then what was another thing which came up was just how important it is to speak about blockchain and the benefits of it in a financial way, presenting the benefits in terms of, commercial success. So I think we all know it's great for transparency. It offers a lot of data security. But if you're holding the keys financially to bring it on something like blockchain, and you're a director at a construction company, that is kind of the bottom line. That is what you're hoping to find out about. So I think we'll talk about that a bit later on as well. But yeah, just the financial side of it, participants you spoke about, every time you discuss something new with even a colleague, but also with a manager or a director, the first question is always, how much will it cost? Moving on to the resistance to change.
Matthew, just a time check. We have about 1 minute left for you.
Oh, right. All right. Okay. So yeah, the resistance to change, old dogs, new tricks came up a few times in the interviews as well. So yeah, this was across the whole of the industry, but it was especially talked about when it's to do with executives also. That might be down to fragmentation of the industry, makes change harder. But yeah, every participant could give several examples of times where they'd shown something new to someone in the industry, and even though the person understood that it was better, they still preferred to do things the old way. Every participant could give an example of that. And then there's just not enough people that know about it, and at the minute, without the training in IT, they don't have the capacity to really understand that either digital teams are seen as support services instead of something like the product itself in construction. Although a participant did mention that this was starting to change. And then there's not a lot of guidance from the government as well. A lot of participants spoke about their experiences when BIM was implemented, especially the 2016 mandate. I think it was. They mentioned that for something like blockchain to fully take off, we need to look back to BIM and how the government spearheaded BIM being implemented in the UK's construction industry. Participants have seen this as the most important barrier. So there's there's kind of what we said needs to happen if we want to implement blockchain with a bit more urgency. Kind of what we can focus on as I think blockchain proponents. I think speaking about it more on social media, presenting the benefits in a financial way to directors and to maybe key decision makers is hugely important, and then maybe as well trying to persuade the government into begin to produce guidance and things like that for construction organisations, and maybe even down the line a mandate and the way that BIM was mandated on public projects. Yeah, so that's everything for me there. Apologies for going slightly over time, but yeah, thanks.